I arrived in Bracken Hollow on the last day of harvest, 1673, a small village tucked between rolling fields and dense, unwelcoming woods. My work, surveying the land for an upcoming trade route, was straightforward. The villagers, however, were not. They spoke little, watched me often. Most unnerving was the bell. It stood in the center of the village, massive, iron, hung between two crooked beams, with a thick hemp rope knotted at its base. It didn't match the rest of the settlement's humble buildings. It was older and darker, streaked in something that looked too much like dried blood. When I asked about it, an old man named Alder simply said, "It's rung once, only once, after harvest, then not again." Why? He glanced at the fields to keep the soil sleeping. That night, the villagers held their harvest feast, but there was no music, no laughter. They ate in silence under the moon, casting nervous glances at the bell. When the food was cleared, the men approached it. One held a lantern, another carried a book, the third pulled the rope. Gone! It rang once, long and low. The sound echoed far across the empty fields. Everyone bowed their heads. I didn't. I asked questions. What happens if it rings again? They all looked at me, not angry, but sad. Then it wakes, Alder whispered. I tried asking what it was, but no one would say more. That night, I stayed in the home of a young couple, Thomas and Ellen. They were kind but quiet. Their daughter, Mary, wouldn't go near the windows after dark. As I lay in bed, the silence of the countryside pressed in on me like a second blanket. Then, at exactly midnight, I heard it. Gone. A second ring. I sat upright, heart racing. Outside, the village was silent, no lanterns lit, no footsteps, no voices. I peered through the warped glass. Alder stood alone in the square, staring at the bell. The rope hung still, but someone had rung it. The next morning, the villagers were different. Quiet turned to fearful. No one made eye contact. No one went near the bell. I found Alder on the church steps. He looked exhausted, pale. You heard it, I said. He nodded slowly. The second ring. Who did it? He shook his head. Doesn't matter. He pointed toward the fields. Pray the soil still sleeps. By afternoon, the air had changed. It was heavy, thick. A breeze moved through the fields, not above the stalks, but within them, like something large was crawling just beneath the surface. The villagers began sealing there, homes with salt and rope. I tried to leave. The forest road was gone. The path I had walked 2 days earlier was swallowed by trees that hadn't been there before. The trail ended at bark and bramble. No birds, no wind, just stillness. That night, Mary knocked on my door. "Something's outside," she whispered. "It's scratching the dirt." I followed her to the window. In the fields, lines of turned soil writhed like snakes. The ground rippled and buckled as if gasping for air. Then, something pushed up from beneath. A long, pale arm, not human, sinewed and knotted like it had grown under centuries of stone. It reached for the moonlight, then slowly sank back down. Mary began to cry. Ellen scooped her up, whispering prayers. Thomas locked every door. The next morning, the villagers gathered around the bell. They were arguing in hushed tones. A few shouted at Alder. One man pointed at me. "He doesn't know the rules," I heard him growl. "This is his doing." I raised my hands. I didn't ring it. I didn't touch it. Alder raised his staff enough. He pointed toward the bell. The rope was gone, burned away. Only ash remained. By sundown, things worsened. The fields were no longer quiet. Low rumbling came from beneath them, like groaning, not of a man, but of earth itself. That night, I watched from the attic window as dark shapes began to rise from the fields. Not people, not animals. Things made of soil and bone. Some crawled. Some dragged limbs behind them. One stood tall, at least 10 feet high, with a twisted face carved into its chest, eyes shut, sleeping. Then it turned toward the village and opened its eyes. I don't remember the screams, just fire and the sound of the bell, somehow ringing again and again, even without a rope. When I awoke, the fields were calm. The bell melted into slag, and the village gone. Just rows of burnt soil and blackened timbers. I walked for days until I found another town. They told me Bracken Hollow had burned 100 years ago. But I was there, and I still dream of the bell ringing, low and long, just before I wake.